Hello and welcome to the video guide explaining the GAC GSC GENED class description revision guide. So for the revision process, you'll have the spreadsheet and this guide. And this is a quick video guide to the guide. So there's a table of contents, of course, listing it out. So a disclaimer, not offering any legal advice about the law, no particular interpretation about the law, no directives are imposed. The purpose of this document and this video is to assist you, the faculty, in their efforts to revise the GENED course descriptions to comply with the law. And if you have the guide, here's the link to the full text of the law. So in 2023, the Florida State Legislature passed a law changing the general education requirements, and the changes to the state core GENED classes are in place, and now we're in the process of revising all the GENED classes. And this will be an ongoing process, but more about that in the future. Now, if you have any questions about the revision process, please contact me. I'm the chair of the General Education Steering Committee, Dr. Michael Bossier, primarily a philosophy professor, but also the chair of this committee. I can't help with questions or concerns about the laws themselves, the Board of Governors, university policy, the politics, etc. And my only sort of purpose and function here is the revision process. Now, the way this is done is there's a spreadsheet and there's a video on how to do the spreadsheet. And the gist of it is that in the spreadsheet, it was provided to us by the Board of Governors with a feedback column, and then we modified the spreadsheet so we could put in the data and collect it hopefully in an effective manner. So what you'll do there, and see the video guide to the spreadsheet for more detail, you look in the BOG feedback column and see what is in there. It's important to note that all humanities courses, regardless of the content, must refer to the Western canon. So it could be, say, a humanities course on Eastern thought, but it still must reference the Western canon. So if you have a humanities course, make sure it fills a humanities gen ed, make sure you've got the Western canon in there. I included in the spreadsheet a description of the current, description of the course from the SCNS. You can look up any course here in the state course numbering system to see descriptions, etc. Now, in terms of the stuff you'll put in, again, this is covered in more detail in the video on the spreadsheet, you'll put in your revised description in that particular column for the class. Also, it's unclear if we need to put in student learning outcomes. In some cases, for 9 classes, the Board of Governors said add SLOs, but we don't have any SLOs for any of the classes, so I'm not sure the exact policy here. I asked for clarification, and it's a mystery at this point. And so probably best to include student learning outcomes, like at least 3. There's also the alignment confirm column. This is where you confirm that it aligns. If it doesn't, it would be removed. There's also the last taught column. If the course has not been taught in a while, it'll be highlighted in red. And if you want it to be kept in the gen ed system, then say yes, you want to keep it, and give a brief explanation like it'll be offered soon, or we just want to keep it. And if you answer no, you're basically saying remove it. There's also a notes column for other stuff. When you complete your spreadsheet, send it to me, and I'll collect them all together, and then we'll put all the data into main spreadsheet and send that on to the appropriate administrators. Now, the information in here is based on the Florida Department of Education PowerPoint they presented, laying out, laying out what they seem to think is important in the law. The complete PDF file of the PowerPoints is here. There's also, of course, the full text of the law. I won't read this at you, but here's the sections of the law. It's 107.25 with the various subsections C, D, etc. and 1007.55. And these are the laws that the parts of the law we have to comply to. Now, here are the revision suggestions. I'm not telling any faculty what they must do. And again, I'm not trying to interpret or judge the law. I was part of the process of revising the state core. And so these are based on my experience in revising the state core and through looking at the text of the law. And again, this is not any legal advice. This is just basically, hey, we've got to revise our gen ed, and here's what we should probably do. So for section 1007.25, this states what gen ed courses may not do. This is what we can't do. And when you're revising the description, avoid these. If they're in there, delete them out. Make no reference to them. So the first one is any reference to identity politics and words or phrases that might be interpreted as such a reference. And this would be clearly like if you talk about identity politics. So looking at it, and if you say this appears to refer to identity politics or anything that might be interpreted as referring to that, then remove those. Also, no course may state or imply that the course is based on theories that systematic racism, sexism, oppression, and privilege are inherent in the institution of the United States and were created to maintain social, political, and economic inequalities. So if there's anything that looks like that, don't have that in your new description. For section 1007.253D, this is what each category of gen ed must do. And so what you want to do here is look for the key phrases for which gen ed requirement your course, the course you're revising, the description you're revising, falls into. And you'd want to, put these keywords into your description so when they run the search on them, they come up as, good. So if you were revising a communication course for communication gen ed, then you'd want to include that the students get the ability to communicate effectively, write clearly, and engage in public speaking. In the case of humanities courses, you'd want to include these key things about how it affords students ability to think critically through the masterings of subjects concerned with human culture, and you make reference appropriately to literature, history, art, music, and philosophy, depending on what your humanities is. This is also the part of Western canon super important. So you must include reference to Western canon, and this is regardless of the course subject. So if you have, for example, a humanities class on Eastern thought, it must include reference to the Western canon. So how to do this, as quickly and concisely as possible. So for classes that are Western humanities classes or include explicit Western content, just state that. Just state something. You could be as direct as saying this course includes key selections from the Western canon, and that would be probably good. In the example of the Introduction to Philosophy class, we say that we include topics from the Western philosophical tradition. So for Western humanities classes, reference, use that word Western, and possibly, preferably, canon. Now, what about non-Western classes that are, say, humanities classes that are explicitly about things outside of the Western world? So what you do there is you can state in your course description that the course will engage with Western tradition or canon. This could be such as like comparisons, contrasted with, etc. So for example, you might say the discussion of Asian art will engage with Western artistic traditions and canon works. And as long as you mention Western canon, again, even if the class is supposed to be about something outside of the geographical boundaries of the West, you gotta include Western canon, that we must include that, every humanities class. You don't have to define Western canon in your description. We've included a definition of this in case people are wondering, what is Western canon? And we stole this from UF. They came up with one, and this is what we're using. But again, you don't have to include the definition. Just include Western canon. For social science courses, they have to afford students an understanding of the basic social and behavioral science concepts and principles used in the analysis of behavior, past and present social, political, and economic issues, And again, just if you have a social science class, put in those keywords. For natural science courses, you've got to include in there that you're giving the students the ability to critically examine and evaluate the principles of the scientific method, common model construction. This is taken verbatim from the law, and use the scientific method to explain natural experience and phenomena. And in your science classes, steer clear of referencing anything that would be, violate the other things. Some classes have been flagged out of the universities because they brought up things like climate change and issues of, environment, etc. So watch out for those. For mathematics classes, they must afford students a mastery of foundational mathematical and computational models and methods by applying such models and methods in problem solving. So throw in those key phrases. And so again, for the particular content things, figure out, we'll say like, what GENED requirement does this class fulfill? Go in there, if you're communications, etc., find those key phrases, put them in. If you're humanities, include those key phrases, but also very critically include reference to the Western canon. And again, even if your class has nothing to do, in terms of geography with the West, make sure that it now does. Make sure that you include the reference to the Western canon, both in the course description and, of course, the course itself. Now, section 1007.55, this specifies what GENED classes should do and should not do. So include references to what the GENED courses should do, and do not include any reference to what they should not do. Purge that out of there. So in terms of what they should do, they're supposed to provide broad foundational knowledge to help students develop intellectual skills and habits and enable them to become effective lifelong learners. A good approach is take those keywords, plug them in there. Include the lifelong learners and being effective in intellectual skills. Put those in there. That will, meet the sort of the guidance. Now this next part is a bit trickier because general education courses should not have curriculum based on content that is unproven, speculative, exploratory. These terms are not defined in the law. So in terms of guidance here, don't just leave those words out. Don't include the word unproven. Don't include the word speculative or speculation. Do not include the word exploratory. Do not include those in the description, and do not include anything that would imply that. And again, we're not engaged in like debating about the definitions of these terms. As a practical matter, is these terms are not defined in the law, and the thing to do is just when you're doing the description of your course, ask yourself, am I implying or suggesting that this content is unproven, speculative, or exploratory? And if the answer is yes, do not include that in your description. Finally, section 1007.551, this says what GENED courses must do. Now, the courses that are, specified in terms of humanities and social sciences explicitly reference that content about Western civilization and these historical documents. So general education courses, stating again, they must meet the course standards of 1007.25, and for courses in humanities and social sciences, when applicable, they got to provide instruction on the historical background and philosophical foundation of Western civilization. So include a reference to Western canon, Western civilization in there, and if it's relevant, reference these particular documents. This would typically be like in political science classes, could also be, of course, history classes, etc. But if your course does include these documents, you could, reference them. You wouldn't have to necessarily list them out like by name, but you could say like nation's historical documents. And of course, if the class does actually focus on these particular documents, it should be included in the description. So student learning outcomes. While they don't seem to be mandated by the law, and again, I've asked about, are we supposed to include them? The BOG feedback mentions for some of the classes, 9 of them, a lack of SLOs. Although we have 98 GENED classes on the list, only 9 of them were flagged as not having SLOs, but 0 of our classes have SLOs in the descriptions. So my recommendation is is that each class description, and there's a column for this in the spreadsheet, should include at least, say, 3 SLOs. Again, this is not a requirement. I'm not like, expecting this. Even if it doesn't mention the lack of SLOs, it might be worth putting them in there, because my thought is that if we don't include them, we'll get it back flat. All the classes that don't include them will be flagged this time around as not including SLOs. So I say we might as well do them the first time around. I've included a revision example from the one I did on the state committee, which was revising Introduction to Philosophy. It includes the original description here, which was what we had to change, and here's the revised description. And as you can see, it includes the key phrases. We got Western in there, so that takes care of that. And we've got the intellectual skills, more effective learners, broad foundational knowledge, so it ticks all the boxes. For the student learning outcomes, came up with 3, and they just are relevant to the class. Again, these don't have to be like elaborate and hyper detailed. Just good approaches. Pick 3 things that the students should come away with from this class. If you want to include more, then that, of course, is fine. Now, if you want additional examples, if you go to from that have been approved by the state, because they're the state core, the link here is in the guide, and it has all the state core classes with the approved and accepted descriptions and the approved and accepted SLOs. So that's a good resource to look at for these examples. And so that is the guide and the process. If you have any questions, email me and I'll respond as quickly as possible. And because my goal as the chair of the General Education Steering Committee is to get through this process as painlessly and effectively as possible, because I'm a philosophy professor. So I understand, what it is to be faculty, because that's what I am. And so I want to make this process as smooth and the least pain as possible. So stay safe, and I'll see you in the future.